My sister-in-law and I were pregnant at the same time, and then gave birth simultaneously. Ever since then, she has frequently pilfered items from my place. Most of the baby products were obtained by her taking from me. I gave her sincere advice, telling her that each baby has a different constitution and should be treated with caution. However, she retorted with sarcasm, accusing me of being petty. Later, the baby food she inadvertently pilfered from me contained peanut ingredients. Her child was severely allergic to peanuts. The throat swelled rapidly, and ultimately, the child suffocated to death. Plunged into boundless grief, she actually took a knife and killed me. When I opened my eyes again, I astonishingly found myself back on the day I had just given birth. Xiaoxue, where did you put that bottle of pregnancy essential oil? Just as my husband entered the door carrying a bag, my sister-in-law, Chenxia, barged in like an uninvited guest. She was rummaging around wantonly in my room, with movements so skillful that it seemed as if she were in her own home. Subconsciously I shrank back. Just 10 minutes ago, I had miserably died under Chenxia's knife. But now upon opening my eyes, I was back in the late pregnancy period. When I was first found to be pregnant, my mother-in-law grinned from ear to ear, clapping her hands and saying it was a double blessing. However, having been reborn, I came to realize that this was actually the beginning of all misfortunes. Xiaoxue, come over quickly and help me look for it. Chenxia urged me with a tinge of impatience in her tone. I dug my nails deep into the flesh of my palm, suppressing the volcanic, like hatred welling up inside me, and trying my best to make my tone sound calm. Sister-in-law, the pregnancy essential oil at home has been used up. If you think it's good, I'll send you the purchase link later. Her hand suddenly stopped moving, and she turned her head to look at me, her face full of dissatisfaction. I'm worried that the ingredients of that pregnancy essential oil are not safe, so I'm kindly helping you test it. We're all family. Why are you acting as if you're guarding against a thief? Every time she took things from me in the past, she used this set of excuses. She claimed to be testing them kindly, but when something really went wrong, she mercilessly took my life. In this new life, I definitely don't want to lose my life again, because of her habit of being stingy and taking advantage. I still replied in a kind and gentle tone. Well, it just so happens that I've just used it up, and I feel that my stretch marks have faded a lot recently, so I was thinking of not buying it for now. Chenxia's face immediately darkened with a hint of anger. If you don't buy it, what will I use? Is your husband Songji short of this little money? I feigned confusion and asked, why don't you buy it yourself? Didn't Big Brother just get a BMW last week? Surely he can afford a bottle of essential oil. As soon as Chenxia heard this, she immediately turned around, her tone full of pride. My husband can afford a BMW all thanks to my careful budgeting and thrifty management everywhere. I sneered inwardly. So taking things from others is her so-called way of saving money. As soon as the words were out of her mouth, my husband, having finished washing, opened the door and happened to hear Chenxia's words. He seemed not to see Chenxia, and directly handed me the bag in his hand, with a gentle warmth radiating from his face. He gently kissed my forehead and said softly, Honey, you've worked hard. Yesterday, I saw that your essential oil was used up. Today, when I passed by the mall after work, I bought you a new bottle. I'll help you apply it later. My eyes instantly welled up with tears, and I rubbed against him affectionately in his arms. In fact, my husband has always disapproved of Chenxia taking things from me. But I have a soft character, and always find it hard to say no to Chenxia. My husband never blames me. Later, when buying things, he always buys 2 copies, fearing that if Chenxia takes things from me, I will have nothing to use. A few times when he forgot, he was taunted by Chenxia, who said that he had no sense of responsibility at all, and had caused both families to be without things. My husband is an upright person. He doesn't want to argue with a woman, and won't talk about these things with his brother. So several times he was scolded by Chenxia until his face turned red. Clearly, it was Chenxia who was asking for things from us, yet in the end, she made us feel ashamed. The losses I suffered in my previous life, I will surely get back one by one in this life. From the moment my husband entered the door, Chenxia's eyes were fixed firmly on the shopping bag. After hearing my husband's words, she inopportunely spoke again. So you've bought a new one. Your husband, Songji, is really generous and willing to spend money on you. Let me help you open it, she said, and was about to walk towards me. I quickly covered the bag in my hand tightly and said, Actually, this is for my husband's big client. His wife is pregnant recently. Just as my husband closed a deal with him, this is considered a gesture of goodwill. I winked at my husband, hinting at him. Right, honey? My husband immediately understood and nodded hurriedly. Yes, we were able to meet the target this quarter thanks to that client. Chenxia's brows knitted tightly. What a coincidence. As soon as I asked to borrow it, you say you're going to give it as a gift. Are you perhaps not willing to lend it to me? I raised my voice feigning anger. Sister-in-law, how could you think of me like that? Which time did I not give you what you asked for? Otherwise, how about this? I'll give you this bottle of essential oil. If my husband doesn't meet the performance target next quarter, and doesn't get the bonus, we'll go to Big Brother, and borrow some money to pay the mortgage. Is that okay? As soon as Chen Xia heard that we were going to borrow money from her family, the hand she had stretched out quickly retracted. Forget it. I'm not the kind of person who takes petty advantages. After saying that, she left in a hurry, for fear that we would really ask her for money the next second. Hearing the sound of the door closing in the living room, I finally let out a long sigh of relief. I could fend her off once, but not for a lifetime, perhaps due to the unstable hormones during pregnancy. After being reborn, I often had nightmares. The fear of dying under a flurry of knives in my previous life always turned into an abyss at night, pulling at my body. Honey, wake up. I escaped from the nightmare, my body drenched in cold sweat. My husband's face gradually emerged under the lamplight, and I finally couldn't help but break down and cry. I'm not a tough-tempered person. After being reborn, I could only deal with Chen Xia with extreme caution. So, I told my husband everything about my previous life in one go. My husband patted my back to soothe me. It was a long time before I raised my head from his arms. Do you believe me? The matter of being reborn sounded rather absurd. I wasn't sure if my husband would look at me with strange eyes. My husband sighed and wiped the sweat from my forehead. Coincidentally, the branch company in Yangqing has issued transfer orders several times. I've always been worried that you would be exhausted from traveling during pregnancy, so I refused. Since that's the case, let's move. The next day, Chen Xia knocked on my door early in the morning, making a loud bang. I opened the door groggily and saw Chen Xia stretching out her hand towards me. Give me the car keys. My younger brother said he wants to go on a self-driving trip recently. By the way, is the gas tank full? I was still a bit dazed just after waking up. Seeing that I didn't respond, Chen Xia directly sat on my sofa with her shoes on. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and give it to me. It suddenly dawned on me that Chen Xia had also borrowed my car in my previous life. Her younger brother had just graduated from university and was clamoring to go on a self-driving trip to Xinjiang with his classmates. Since I was pregnant and had little chance to drive, I simply lent it to her. But unexpectedly, Chen Xia became even more insatiable. She not only asked me to fill up the gas tank, but also several times during the self-driving trip asked me to transfer money to her younger brother for gas. Otherwise she would threaten to leave the car on the road and let her younger brother take the high-speed train back. My car was a dowry from my family before I got married. Naturally, I couldn't let her just leave it on the road, so I had to endure and transfer money for gas. When her younger brother returned, the car was filthy and the seats were severely damaged. After I sent it to the repair shop, Chen Xia disappeared. When we met again, she didn't mention compensation at all. I calmly said, "Didn't Big Brother just get a new car? My husband's car is so expensive. How could I lend it to my younger brother to drive to such a far place? Your car isn't worth much, so it's just right for him to practice. Then you have your own car, don't you? I need to drive my own car. What would I do if I lent it to him?" I was almost amused by her words. Chen Xia really knew how to be generous with other people's things. I can't lend you the car. I'm going to sell it at the second-hand market tomorrow. This was true. After discussing with my husband about moving, I planned to sell the car. Chen Xia was stunned, and her tone became excited. Why are you selling the car? She looked as if it were her car being sold. Due to the impact of the general environment this year, our income has decreased. I also want to lighten Songji's burden. Well, how about this? Wait until my younger brother comes back from the self-driving trip, and then you sell it. It doesn't matter waiting for a little while. What she said seemed reasonable, but I hadn't forgotten the miserable situation after lending her the car in my previous life. Even if I could sell it, the price would be greatly reduced. An idea occurred to me. Well, if your younger brother is really in a hurry to use the car, how about I sell it to him at a discount? I bought this car for 188,000 yuan, and have only driven it for over 10,000 kilometers. I'll give it to him at a friendly price of 100,000 yuan. Chen Xia immediately fell silent and mumbled, forget it. I can't count on you." Then she turned around and left my house. I looked at her back and couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It turned out that refusing someone's unreasonable request was such a refreshing thing. In the evening when I got home, my husband told me that he had accepted the company's transfer order. In another half-month, after finishing the final work handover, we could leave here. Originally, it would be the most stable if my husband stayed locally. If it weren't for my repeated concessions before, Chen Xia's arrogance wouldn't have grown. From the time we just got married, she proposed to hold the wedding together to save on the venue fee. But she used the venue I carefully selected to hold the ceremony first. When my husband and I walked the aisle, the guests were already starting to leave. Later, when I was pregnant, my constitution was poor, and I bought a lot of supplements. She took some of them as a matter of course. Time and time again, asking for things from me became a given. If it weren't for being reborn, I'm afraid I would still be tolerating. The next day, As soon as I went downstairs to drive the car to the second-hand market, I found that the car body had been scratched several times by something sharp, and a large piece of the paint on the car body had fallen off. I looked around and found that the camera directly facing the parking space was blocked by a balloon. It was clearly a pre-planned act. I had just said I was going to sell the car yesterday, and this happened today. I held my belly to calm myself down. Just as I was about to call the insurance company to report the case, Chen Xia ran over from a distance. The moment she saw the car body, a hint of triumph flashed in her eyes. Xiaoxue, what happened to your car? I don't know who scratched it. She hooked the corner of her mouth into a smile and looked at the car body. How could you be so careless? With the car scratched like this, can you still sell it today? Seeing her like this, I suddenly wasn't angry anymore. I waved my hand at her. It's okay. Since I got pregnant, Songji was afraid that it wasn't safe for me to drive, so he installed a dashcam for me. This is clearly malicious damage by someone else. Can't I find the culprit by sending the dashcam footage to the insurance company? Chen Xia was stunned. Seeing that I was about to make a call, she nervously pressed my hand. Xiaoxue, don't call the insurance company in such a hurry. I think the scratches aren't deep. You can just touch up the paint yourself. I pretended to be angry and raised my voice. Sister-in-law, what are you talking about? Maliciously damaging other people's property is a crime. You could even go to jail. How could I let such a person continue to commit crimes? Besides, with the car scratched like this, even if I sell it, I probably won't get a good price. As soon as Chen Xia heard me mention crime, her face turned even paler. People in society are so emotional these days. You're pregnant now. If you're retaliated against, it won't be worth it. I shook my head. This is a society ruled by law. What are you afraid of? Chen Xia suddenly snatched the phone from my hand. Xiaoxue, didn't you say you were going to sell the car to me yesterday? I've thought about it. Your car is really good. When shall we go through the transfer procedures? I pretended to be reluctant. But the car is like this. Do you really want to buy it, sister-in-law? How about we talk about it after I find the person who scratched the car? Chen Xia quickly waved her hand. My younger brother is in a hurry to use the car. These scratches are nothing. Let's go to the vehicle management office to transfer the ownership this afternoon. I had to nod helplessly. Well, I'll listen to you, sister-in-law. After the transfer in the afternoon, Chen Xia's face was deathly pale. She quickly got into the car to check the dashcam. Not long after, she let out a scream. Xiaoxue, why isn't your dashcam turned on? I chuckled, looking innocent. Oh, maybe I forgot to turn it on. I haven't driven this car for a long time. Then I took a taxi home, ignoring Chen Xia's furious outburst behind me. Along the way, I admired the beautiful scenery on the roadside, and was in a great mood. It was the first time I had gotten the better of Chen Xia. I didn't know if Chen Xia had noticed something recently. She hadn't come to bother me for the past 2 days, and I was happy for the peace. But I didn't expect that my mother-in-law would come to me. Xiaoxue, I heard that Chen Xia bought a car from you? I got up to pour her a glass of water and nodded. Yes, sister-in-law said her younger brother wants to go on a self-driving trip. My mother-in-law said disapprovingly. We're all family. Her younger brother wants to go on a self-driving trip. You could just lend him the car. Why talk about money? When I held the wedding together with my sister-in-law, it was my mother-in-law who took the lead in agreeing. Chen Xia is different from me. My husband and I were in a relationship of free love. She was the daughter-in-law my mother-in-law carefully selected from the matchmaking corner. In some aspects, the two of them are quite similar. I suddenly realized that she had come today to support Chen Xia. Well, after her younger brother comes back, ask Chen Xia to transfer the car back. Let's just pretend this never happened. I cleared my throat. Mom, to be honest with you, I'm selling the car because Songji's job has been transferred to another city. I'm pregnant and can't drive. By the time her younger brother comes back, we'll already be in another city. My mother-in-law looked surprised. Why is he suddenly being transferred to another city? What happened? I lowered my head and my shoulders trembled. It's all my fault. I'm pregnant and can't go to work. Songji is the only one supporting the family. Usually it's okay, but sister-in-law often comes to take things from me. Our family's expenses are getting bigger and bigger. Songji works overtime until the early hours of the morning every day. In order to earn more money for the baby's milk powder, he agreed to the company's offer to develop in another city. As soon as my mother-in-law heard this, she couldn't sit still. The male descendants of the Song family were treasures in her eyes. How could her son endure such hardship? Seeing me crying sadly, she didn't say much more. She just left a sentence. Your sister-in-law is used to being thrifty. I'll talk to her later. Don't be too sad. You're pregnant. Then she left in a hurry. I thought that after my mother-in-law went back, Chen Xia would restrain herself a bit. But I didn't expect her ambition to grow even bigger. Xiaoxue, a friend of mine also booked a package at this maternity center when she was pregnant. The service is excellent. There's a 2-person group purchase recently. We can keep each other company. Chen Xia excitedly waved the flyer in her hand and stuffed it to me, listing a whole bunch of benefits of staying in a maternity center for the confinement period. In my previous life, Chen Xia also pulled me like this to book it. But I had already chosen a maternity center, so I refused. As soon as Chen Xia heard this, she couldn't sit still on the spot. I'm doing this for your own good. If we women don't have a good confinement period, we'll have health problems. And I've paid for your share. If you don't go, you have to transfer the money to me. I thought she had good intentions at that time, so I went with her. Who would have thought that the so-called group purchase discount was actually a buy one get one free deal? I paid the money for the purchase service, and she enjoyed the free service. And after arriving at the maternity center, because she introduced a customer, she was also upgraded to VIP service for free. I spent tens of thousands of yuan, but the service I received was not as good as hers. Now that I think about it, Chen Xia had already planned to take advantage of me. I happily took her hand. I've been paying attention to this maternity center for a long time. There's a buy one get one free activity recently, right? I heard that if you introduce a customer, you can be upgraded to VIP service for free. If we split the cost, it would be less than 50,000 yuan per person. But didn't Big Brother say he wants you to stay at home for the confinement period? Will he agree to you going to the maternity center? Chen Xia didn't expect me to know about the activities of this store. Her face panicked for a moment, and then returned to normal. I haven't told him yet. But with this buy one get one free activity, if you pay, I can also go. It's a win-win situation. I can even let you be upgraded to VIP service. She said it so confidently, but I had already heard from my husband that Big Brother originally planned for her to stay at home for the confinement period. Big Brother bought a second-hand BMW to show off. The monthly mortgage and car loan were weighing him down. Last time Chen Xia, feeling guilty, took out all her Sifangchan to buy my car. How could she have money to pay for the maternity center? Sister-in-law, you know I can't afford such expensive fees on my own. Well, how about this? Let's both stay at home for the confinement period. When Chen Xia heard this, her face turned a bit unpleasant. Xiaoxue, a woman needs professional care during the confinement period. Staying at home is not proper at all. Forget it. You just don't have the fortune to enjoy it. I was about to say something more when I saw her storm off in a huff. As the moving day was approaching, I started to handle some matters that needed to be wrapped up. The house couldn't be sold for a while, so I contacted an agent and prepared to rent it out. As soon as I went downstairs, I saw Chen Xia talking to a strange man. Brother Su, are you really going to give me such nice skincare products? Chen Xia blushed shyly, her body slightly twisting towards the man. Brother Su reached out and put his arm around Chen Xia's waist. Who else would I give it to if not you? My wife at home is no match for such nice things. Did you eat the bird's nest I gave you last time? As he spoke, the man's profile was revealed to me. He was Chen Xia's former colleague. I had seen him in the group dinner photos on her WeChat moments before. But I never expected that Chen Xia would have the nerve to flirt with another man outside. If your wife finds out, you'll be in big trouble. So what? It's not something extremely precious. Your husband is really heartless. He doesn't know how to take good care of you when you're pregnant. Chen Xia pouted slightly, her tone coquettish. Maybe it's because my figure has changed since I got pregnant. Now his heart has drifted to other women. How could that be? Standing next to you, I'm almost charmed to death. Don't say such things. I'm embarrassed. As the two flirted with each other, I took out my phone and recorded the scene. It seemed that since Chen Xia couldn't get any benefits from me, she had turned to others. The daughter-in-law my mother-in-law carefully selected didn't seem to be as she expected. After I sent the photos to the agent, someone soon came to see the house. They were about to sign the contract, when the door was suddenly pushed open by Chen Xia. She looked furious. Who allowed you to rent out the house? Didn't I say that my younger brother would move in directly after he gets a job? This is my house, and I have the right to deal with it. After Chen Xia learned that I was going to move away with my husband, she had been subtly unsure that the empty house could be used by her younger brother. Remembering how he had ruined my car in my previous life, there was no way I would let him live in the house. This little episode didn't affect my action of signing the contract. After explaining the housing safety issues to the agent, they left with the contract. As soon as the people left, Chen Xia immediately called someone outside to come in and smile at me apologetically. It was her younger brother, Chen Chong. I was too excited just now. Don't take it to heart, Xiaoxue. Quickly plead with Xiaoxue and ask her to let you live in the house. As she spoke, she was about to press her younger brother's head to bow to me. Was she trying to morally blackmail me? I quickly stepped aside. The contract has been signed. If I break the contract, I have to pay 3 times the compensation. I think you'd better find another place for your younger brother. As soon as Chen Chong heard this, his face immediately darkened, and he cursed at Chen Xia. Damn it, are you tired of living? I've been acting like a grandson and apologizing here, but I still can't move in. I don't care what method you use. Find me a house quickly. If you delay me and my girlfriend from moving in, see how I deal with you. His face was ferocious, and vicious words came out of his mouth one after another. Chen Xia's face turned red from being scolded, but she didn't retort. Worried that he might start hitting, I quickly called my husband. Finally, Chen Xia compromised and promised to find another house for him, and the two left my house. My husband was also very scared and quickly comforted me. The handover at the company is almost done. In 2 more days we'll move. I nodded, still feeling a bit scared. The Chen family were all ruthless people. For safety's sake, we had to move as soon as possible. I thought everything was about to be settled, but unexpectedly, the tenant who had already signed the contract suddenly breached the contract. I asked several times, but couldn't get a clear answer. My intuition told me that the reason must still be related to Chen Xia. I called the rental agent, afraid that I would ask for the agency fee back. The agent told me the whole story. It turned out that after the tenant left, Chen Chong had approached him. Chen Chong was fat and spoke fiercely, and he made it clear that my house had been reserved by him. If the tenant really moved in, there would surely be a lot of trouble. I felt frustrated. After thinking for a long time, I transferred the tenant's deposit back to him. For someone like Chen Chong, I decided to fight fire with fire. In the afternoon, Chen Xia, with a big belly, was carrying a suitcase. Chen Chong didn't seem to have any intention of helping. He spat on the ground. You women are so useless. It still has to be me to solve the problem. Chen Xia frowned, looking a bit embarrassed. As soon as she saw me standing at the door, she immediately walked over with a smile. Xiaoxue, I heard that your tenant breached the contract. Coincidentally, my younger brother still hasn't found a house. Well, how about this? I'll pay you the rent, and you rent the house to us. Chen Chong sneered disdainfully when he heard this. Does she dare not rent it to us? I also smiled. I really dared. The elevator in the corridor rang, and a man in a white vest walked out. He was nearly 1.9 meters tall, with well-defined muscles all over his body, different from Chen Chong's fat. The moment the two passed by each other, Chen Chong froze. Sorry, I've already found a tenant for this house. Zheng Yu was my former fitness coach. 3 years ago, he brought his mother to this city to see a doctor. Many landlords were afraid that someone would die in their houses and didn't dare to rent to them. After hearing about my situation, Zheng Yu readily agreed. I rented the house to him at a rent lower than the market price. Chen Chong still had that arrogant attitude. You bitch, are you deliberately not going to rent the house to me? Is this guy your lover? I didn't expect your husband to be so generous. He left the house to his lover after moving away, still being promiscuous while pregnant. The child in your belly might be a bastard. Chen Xia also chimed in. Xiaoxue, you'd better let him go quickly. I'll pretend I didn't see what happened today. I'll also keep your secret from Songji. The two of them were singing in unison and convicting me. Zheng Yu moved his body and pinched Chen Chong's neck with one hand, leading him outside. Watch your mouth. It's better for us men to talk outside. Chen Chong struggled a few times, but found he couldn't move, so he just kept swearing. Let go of me. Believe it or not, I'll kill you. The two walked further and further away. Chen Xia wanted to catch up, but I stopped her. Chen Xia, I used to turn a blind eye when you took things from me, but please don't have such a strong desire to possess other people's property. Also, it's really necessary to be more prudent during pregnancy. Don't you think so? Tomorrow was the moving day. My husband, afraid that I would be tired, had already called a moving company to pack. I thought things were over, but unexpectedly, something happened to Chen Xia. Songji's older brother, Songcheng, came to the door. Get out here. The man's voice was so loud that it startled me. My husband stroked my head to soothe me, and then pushed the door open and walked out. Where's that bitch Xing Shui? Get her out here quickly. Songcheng used to be a contractor. After contracting several projects and making some money, he became arrogant. Even when his mother talked to him, she had to do it in a pleading tone. Brother Xiaoxue is my wife. Watch your mouth. Songcheng didn't show any courtesy and punched my husband in the face. So what if I don't watch my mouth? That bitch Zheng Shui called a strange man to scare my wife. Now my wife is in the hospital with signs of miscarriage. If I don't get an explanation today, I'll kill the bastard in her belly too. I was shocked. Zheng Yu wasn't the type to attack a woman. But since the person was in the hospital, it seemed this matter couldn't be avoided. I walked out of the room and said to Songcheng, let's go to the hospital first. We really need to figure things out. On the way to the hospital, I sent a text message to Zheng Yu, and he quickly replied. Not long after he took Chen Chong away, Chen Xia came and took Chen Chong away. The two of them didn't even come into contact with each other, let alone scare her. They didn't even say a word. After learning about the situation, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then I called the property management. Chen Xia did have signs of threatened miscarriage, and there were several purple-blue scars on her body. At first glance, it really looked like she had been bullied. As soon as Chen Xia saw me, she cowered under the quilt trembling, looking very much like an innocent victim. I said calmly, brother, don't be in a hurry. I've asked the property management to check the surveillance. The truth will be known soon. As soon as Songcheng heard this, he thought I was trying to shirk responsibility and reached out to grab me again. My wife only went to your place today. If it wasn't your lover who did it, then who else? You're really something. You've bewitched my younger brother and put a green hat on our Song family. We don't even know if the child in your belly is from our family. My husband said firmly, watch your mouth. Don't jump to conclusions before things are clear. My husband had grown up under Songcheng's oppression since he was a child and had been extremely afraid of his older brother. But at this moment, he stood in front of me to support me. At the same time, the surveillance video from the property management was retrieved. After watching it all, I sneered and handed the phone to Song Chung. After Chun Chang was taken away by Chin Xia, he was so angry that he had no way to vent, and finally he took his fists and feet out on Chin Xia. It's all because of you. You made me lose so much face, you bitch. You can't do anything right. You slut. Just because you got married, you want to get rid of me. Let me tell you, Mom gave birth to you to be my servant. Chun Chang was so emotionally charged that he almost kicked her belly several times. After watching the video, Song Chang's veins were bulging with anger. I'll settle the score with Chun Chang about this. But ultimately, you two are also at fault. If you had rented the house to Chun Chang, none of this would have happened. You have to bear Chun Xia's medical expenses, nutrition fees, and mental damage compensation. My husband wanted to step forward and argue, but I shook my head to stop him. All right, we'll bear the expenses. The root of this matter was the child. But what if the child Chun Xia was carrying wasn't Song Chang's? Ever since I saw Chun Xia with brother Su, I would pass by that area from time to time. Sure enough, I often caught them flirting in secluded places. Several times, I could even see their intertwined naked bodies. After leaving the hospital, I sent the video I took at that time to brother Su's wife. That woman was not to be trifled with. Brother Su was alive and son-in-law. His high school diploma allowed him to get such a decent job, thanks to his wife's help. Sure enough, in the afternoon, I heard my mother-in-law call us to rush to the hospital. When my husband and I arrived, Chun Xia was already huddled in the corner of the ward with messy hair, surrounded by a large crowd. Song Chung, like a madman, picked up a stool and was about to smash it on her. You slut. I work so hard outside to earn money, and you're fooling around behind my back. The stool was blocked by brother Su. Xia is still pregnant. Let's talk outside if there's anything. This scene made Song Ching even more furious. He immediately started fighting with brother Su on the spot. Brother Su's wife watched coldly. After leaving a sentence about getting a divorce, she disappeared. My mother-in-law was wailing and crying beside them, demanding a paternity test and pointing at Chun Xia, calling her a slut. The scene was in chaos. I made an excuse to my mother-in-law that I had a stomachache and wanted to leave first. My mother-in-law was now extremely worried about the child in my belly, and quickly told Song Ji to take me away. Before leaving, I stared at Chun Xia in the corner for a few seconds, sneered and mouthed to her, "You deserve it." Without the mess of Chun Xia's affair, our move became much smoother. Because of Chun Xia's matter, the family was in a turmoil. My husband and I took this opportunity to quickly leave this place full of troubles. Not long after arriving in Yangcheng, my husband booked a maternity center for me locally. We took a tour on the spot. The environment was nice, the service was excellent, and most importantly, the security measures were comprehensive. A month later, the baby was born, and my husband also settled down in Yangcheng. I heard that Chun Xia had a paternity test, and the child turned out to be brother Su's. No wonder brother Su chose to defend Chun Xia under such circumstances that day. Song Chung divorced Chun Xia, but brother Su was reluctant to give up everything he had now and refused to divorce his wife. Chun Xia could only slink back to her parents' home with the child, but was driven out by the vengeful Chun Chang. Forced by helplessness, she could only rent a house. After the divorce, she almost left with nothing and could only rent a small place. Brother Su would occasionally visit her, but after giving birth, because she didn't have a proper confinement period, she often had headaches, fevers, and would involuntarily urinate when coughing. After a few times brother Su stopped visiting. With no one to take care of her, she lived in a muddled state. She even called me several times to borrow money. After the painful experience of my previous life, I naturally wouldn't have anything to do with her again. I immediately blocked all her contact information. A few years later, when I saw Chun Xia again, she was kneeling on the ground with a disheveled face, begging with her child. And I was pushing an imported stroller, walking towards the mall. All that is present is the best.